Thank you, Virginia, for your introduction. And thank you so much for everyone coming out tonight to talk about native plants. So I'll have some time at the end for discussion or questions and answers. We'll really open it up at that point. There's a lot of knowledge in the room as well as a lot of knowledge in this head here. So we want to get out as much information as we can and really work on how do we improve the ecosystem that we live in. So I was contacted at the end of 2024 with an opportunity to propagate a whole bunch of native plants that were going into restoration sites across the county. Some of it was going onto Bureau of Land Management land, and some of it was going on US Forest Service land here in the Carson National Forest. And I was trying to retire, but I couldn't really refuse an opportunity. And they said that they only wanted 5,000 plants. So I said, well, that's fine. So 5,000, that means I grow 6,000, so they get 5,000 really, really nice plants. And so they sent me all the seeds for that. I started doing the pre-processing of those seeds in the early winter of 2025. And then they called back and they said, well, now that you're doing this, of course, you're tied to your greenhouse. We have these other projects that we would like for you to do of seed multiplication. So I said, well, I'm already working, so okay, what's a few more plants? And then that turned out to be another 7,000 plants. And so, of course, if I'm going to do 7,000, that means I need to do 8,000, so we get 7,000 good ones. And so at that point, I was producing 14,000 plants. Well, that seems like a fun retirement, right? So what they did was they supplied me with diverse accessions of native seeds. So an accession is a harvesting of a bunch of seeds at a particular time at a particular place. And so the seed mix, the seeds that they sent me were all separate species, but very diverse genetics. So they wanted to capture the widest genetic pool of genetic information of these species so that when this got planted out into the county, that diversity continued. And the project was around support for pollinators. So the talk that I'm going to give you tonight is about many of these species that were planted out in the county last fall, and a couple others that I was doing just for seed multiplication. And I threw in one grass in there because I want you to think not only about what is happening out on the county, but what is happening on your own land. Because, many of us are, quote unquote, property owners, which I don't really like that term. We're stewards of a plot of land here in this county, and we need to take good care of that land. And how can we have that land also support the local ecosystem? So that's what we're talking about tonight. I am Paul Cross, Charybda Farms, as you heard from the introduction. And I was very lucky to get this project. So that initial picture, this is my greenhouse. The greenhouse runs entirely off of water catchment. There's 17,000 gallons of rainwater storage. Most of it continues to be full for this day. We got a little bit today. But I harvest the rain and the snow and I store it. I might even store it for a year in advance so that I have enough water for the next year to produce whatever I'm producing. So every plant that you'll see today in these slides that were the pictures that were taken by me were produced only with rainwater catchment. There's no groundwater in anything that you'll see grown in my greenhouse. So I wasn't involved in choosing any of these species that I was producing. It was what the the organizations wanted me to produce to be planted out in the county. And so, but I kind of put together what I thought the criteria was on doing that. And so pollinator support was kind of the primary goal. A long bloom time supports the pollinators for a longer period of time. These are species that are native in or near Taos County, and they're adaptable to a wide range of conditions. Of course, any plant that's growing here has got to be pretty adaptable to survive, and low to medium requirements, which I'll define later on. So we're talking about shrubs, forbs, and grasses. Most people know what a shrub is. It's a woody plant that's smaller than a tree. A forb is not a term you might have heard, but it's a useful term, and that's when we're referring to plants that die back at the end of the year, but come back up from the roots the next. So it's like an herbaceous perennial would be another way to describe that sort of plant. And grasses, we all know what a grass is. And I would say that my expertise is really in being a propagator. I don't have a formal degree in botany or anything like that. So there'll be time at the end for all the botanists to correct me if I get anything wrong here. So first shrub, Flugia paradoxa, and then you see FAPA. So all the plants have a plant code, and the way that they made these codes was they took the first two letters of the genus and the first two letters of the species. So Flugia paradoxa becomes FAPA. So that makes it a lot easier when you're texting to your botanist friends and you're talking about a plant that you can just say FAPA and they know exactly who you're talking about. Apache plume is the plant. And if you drive down the canyon to Velarde in the spring and you look on the sides of the canyon and you see there's just white flowers going all the way up the sides of the canyon, that's Apache plume. And so here you see it in the bloom, and then what it does is it ends up creating this pink seed plume, which is very handsome. And that plant can get as much as 4 to 6 feet tall and 4 to 6 feet wide, depending on how much water it's able to access. But it's also a plant that can just survive on native rainfall. It's definitely a keystone species here for providing nectar to a wide, diverse array of insects. So here I say no strat or 30 days dry cold strat. So by strat, what I'm talking about is stratification. Stratification is the pre-treatment of seeds before you sow them to germinate. So in this particular case, you wouldn't have to do anything special at all. What you could do is a 30-day dry cold strat. All that means is take that packet of seeds and stick it in the refrigerator for a month. And so what that is doing is that's simulating a cold period or a winter so that when you bring it out in the warmth to germinate, it's like, oh, it's spring, it's time for me to grow. So what we're going to be talking about is not only the species that were planted out, but think of them as something that you might plant at your own home. And so think about it as if you were going to do your own little pocket prairie next to your driveway or something, where it just got a little bit of extra runoff, but otherwise it was just somewhere far enough away that you probably weren't going to water it with a hose, but you wanted to plant something that supports the pollinator. That's the kind of stuff we're going to talk about tonight. So 2 seeds per cell. We'll talk about what that cell is in a minute. And this plant germinates really fast. Germination is just when a plant sprouts. And it can happen in about a week with this one, which is pretty good. When you plant it, you just want it in full sun. And this blooms from April all the way into October. And some of that might just be holding onto those seed heads, or it can still be producing some of these white flowers. So when I say seeds per cell, what is a cell? So what I would recommend if you're going to play along with the game tonight about making your imaginary pocket prairie, you're going to do it in this tray of 6 six-packs. And I want you to use the deep ones, not the shallow ones. You can see that the pack is a little bit higher than the bottom tray that's underneath it. So you want a six-pack that is about 3 inches deep. So with that 3 inches of depth, you will have enough of potting mix in there to create a nice size root system. Now you'll see over here on the table that we're growing in these skinny deep tubes that are about 8 inches deep. So that is the same amount of potting mix volume as this same tray that you're seeing here. So the advantage to that, the ones that are being planted out on the county, they're watered once and that's it, and everyone walks away, and then it's up to them to fend for themselves. Those are like expensive and very specialized. This sort of thing you could get at any garden center, and it would be the same soil volume. Your root is just going to be a little bit shallower and wider at first. It'll work just as well. Okay, next shrub is Erna, as I would call it, Ericomeria nauseosa, or chamisa. And it's certainly a plant that a lot of people know. It's really striking in the fall when it's bright yellow. It's one of the last things to bloom. Great for nectar, great for pollen, late blooming, and again, another plant. Doesn't require any supplemental water. And I took this picture on the right. You see there's a larva there. And that is one of the other names for chamisa is rubber rabbit brush. I've never really heard that term. I've seen it in conversations and stuff. Most people just call it chamisa here. But there is that larva there is actually the larva of a beetle, and it's called the rabbit brush beetle. So as soon as you start working with these plants, you're supporting the native insect population. I get these larvae every year. And so the eggs from this particular beetle are in the ground right under the chamisa plant. And they hatch, they climb up, and they go to town on the chamisa. Doesn't bother the chamisa plant at all. It's a symbiotic relationship among the two. And one little quick tip for you is you'll notice on the larva that there are, down on the bottom there, I don't know if you can see, but there are 3 sets of legs. So a larva that has 3 legs is a beetle. If it has 5 legs or more, it's a moth or a caterpillar. So just because you are looking at the larva, you may not know who it is, but you'll at least know that much. And it's kind of a fun tip. Chamisa gets really big. If you give it too much water, it's going to flop over. So you really got to control yourself. Give it some water to establish, but you see this on the roadsides all the time with no supplemental water. It's a great plant, supports the pollinator. So now we're going to go from shrubs and start looking at a bunch of forbs. So of course, when you're thinking about pollinator support, a lot of people immediately comes to mind monarchs and butterflies. So Asclepias speciosa, showy milkweed, ASSP is the plant code for it. It is the obligate, this is one of the Asclepias species that is obligate for the larval stage of monarchs, excuse me. And the nice thing about this one is this is the one that you mainly see around Taos. It has big leaves. It's about 3 feet tall. It's less aggressive spreading than some of the other milkweeds. And so it's a really good choice. Cold moist stratification for 30 days. I recommend it. It is somewhat optional for this species. And so let's go over what cold moist stratification is. So that's when you take a sandwich bag, put in some sand and a little bit of water, just enough to have it moist, not so that you can wring it out and drip water, and put your seeds in with that. Stick that in the refrigerator for 30 days. The thing to remember is to pull it out of the fridge in 30 days. Because once you stick it in the back of your fridge, set an appointment on your calendar to pull that out. Take that, dump it all into a fine sieve, and then take that outside. Take your hose, run all the water through that sieve. All the sand is going to go out, and you're going to be left with just the seeds that have been moistened and are ready to sprout, thinking it's spring. Really easy to do. When you sow that one, these are very close to the surface, not even a 1/4 inch down on really any of these things. 2 seeds per cell. It'll germinate in about 10 days, all the way up to 20, 30 days. Be patient on all of these because some will start early and some will take some time. Seeds, especially with these sort of wide, diverse genetics. In nature, the plants never all want to germinate uniformly. That's something that we're trying to breed in for agriculture. You want seeds to germinate at a variety of times. So what we do, though, is with the stratification, we're trying to get everyone kind of on the same schedule so that you can work with the plants all at once. So full sun, medium water. By medium water, what I'm talking about is you'll see this along the roadsides. You'll see it on the edges of ditches. So that's all the extra water it would need. And I say 12 plant minimum. If you want to support the monarchs, you can't just have 1 or 2 milkweeds. A butterfly is going to come and look at that and say, that's not enough food. Like, my caterpillars are going to want to be voracious eaters. I want a lot of plants. So you really want to do at least 12 plants. And then the butterflies are going to be like, hey, this is a great place for me to lay my eggs. My caterpillars are going to hatch here, and they're going to have plenty of leaves to eat on. Now, when you're growing this plant, you should expect to get aphids. So aphids want to use that same strategy of like, oh, I'll eat this toxic plant that doesn't bother me, and then nobody's going to want to eat me because I'm toxic. So that's the strategy. That's why you see with the monarch larvae is they're very striking in their coloration. They're showing off that nobody wants to eat them. Okay, next plant, Asclepias subverticillata. Horsetail milkweed. Another name for this is poison milkweed. And this is one of the most poisonous milkweeds out there. So that's desirable for the monarchs, but for your average field where you're grazing, it's a little less desirable, right? So it's another larval host for the monarchs. It's a shorter plant. It only gets about maybe 1.5 feet tall, something like that. Full or part sun, it can get some morning shade, afternoon shade, it'll do fine. 7 to 21 days. Again, you need to do that cold moist stratification for this one, absolutely, in order to really get a good germination on it. And I would also say that the seeds can be really kind of variable in their thickness. So some of them will feel really thin, like you think it's void, but it still is a good seed. So I encourage plant every seed you find on this one. Some of them are a little bit thicker, some of them are a little bit thinner, but in my experience, they will mostly all germinate. Again, that same medium water. So we're getting into the asters now. So Dietiaria canescens. So canescens, what does that mean? So this used to be called, and the code on this is Maca2, okay? And that comes from its former name. The botanists are always learning about who's related to whom, and they're gonna change things from time to time as more information develops. But for some reason, they changed the name, but they didn't change the plant code on this one yet. A hoary tansy aster, okay? So hoary means hairy, canescens means hairy. In botany, there are more words for hairy than a hairdresser would ever know. I mean, so we're going to hear some other words, Latin words for hairy over time. And here's a picture of a larva of a moth that I get every year on my asters. It's a beautiful larva. It's actually prettier than the adult. And that is your hooded owlet moth. And so it's just a brown moth with a big brown hairy head. But actually, it's not big. It's like a little 1-inch one. You'll see it in your house. But now you know who it ate in order to develop into an adult. You'll see it on the asters. The asters are great because they're late blooming. You see them in the fall, blooming around the same time as the chamisa. And so you get that beautiful purple and yellow that happens in the fall. It's really a good sight to behold. So it starts blooming in August and it'll go into October. Depending on what happens in the October weather, it could be, you'd still see some color even in early November on this one. So the nice thing about these sort of late blooming flowers is that the monarchs are doing their southward migration. So they go through a few life cycles, and I think it's the 4th generation is the one that flies back down either south, going to Mexico, or some of them go off to California. And so having a food source late during that migration is an important support that we can do. And what these asters do is they're not a very long-lived plant. So a perennial plant is a plant that lives 3 years or more. Perennial doesn't mean immortal or eternal, right? It just means plus 3 years or more. So this is a short-lived perennial. Some of them are just biennial, but they will reseed. And so it's a plant that reseeds readily. You can collect seed off a plant in the fall on that one. Oh, this one is one that I wish I kept more plants back. I did grow extra of everything, and then BLM was willing to plant it all out. So even the extra 1,000 plants that I had, I just gave them to the BLM for them to use. Heterotheca villosa. Villosa is another word for hairy. So it's a good, what I would call a 3-season species. What intrigues me about this one is Al Schneider. He has a website called Southwest, which is SW Colorado wildflowers.com. And I'll show that at the end so you can write that down. He has an amazing website that he has been building for decades. And he has this growing at his land. His land is in Southwest Colorado. And he says that it outcompetes exotic weeds. So if we can plant a native flower that outcompetes exotic weeds and blooms from summer well into fall, I'm all for it. So I only saved like 1 or 2 of these, but then when I started making the stock, I was like, what have I done? I've gotten rid of all those seeds. The thing about a lot of these plants is you can't find them in the garden centers here. These are native species. You go to the garden center and you look at the plants, a lot of them are exotic Eurasian plants. They look great, they might do okay here, but they're not going to really be contributing to the local ecosystem. So this one, I do have a commercial seed source for it. I'm somewhat iffy about it because if you look at their pictures, their seedling is not the right seedling. We'll see what happens. I'm going to try to get some of those seeds and grow some more, or I can save some off the 2 plants if I put them in my garden. A low water use plant just works on the native rainfall. No stratification required. Put 4 little seeds in one of those cells, and you'll start seeing germination in about 6 days. So it's an easy plant to start. And then it stays pretty small for quite a while, but eventually it'll get about 2 feet high, and maybe as wide as 3 feet. Beautiful yellow, daisy-type flower. And it blooms over and over again, starting in very late spring and going all the way into the fall. So it'll bloom for several weeks. It'll take a brief pause for a week or two and then start up again. Really interesting plant. Oh, look at this. This is Heliomeris multiflora. HEMU is the code on it, showy golden eye. That picture from Al Schneider was like breathtaking when I first saw it. This is not one that we planted out with the restoration that happened last year. It was one that I grew for seed multiplication. So you can see this seed farm below. That is a picture where I grew those seedlings starting in May and delivered them in October, very beginning of October, maybe even in September. And that is first year flowering from seed. Really amazing. And so what they were doing there was they were taking a diverse lot of HEMU seeds. I grew the plugs, plugged them at this farm. The farmer takes care of them, and then the Southwest Seed Project is going to go and harvest those seeds from those plants for the next 3 years. And so that's going to multiply the amount of seeds so that we can do more restoration work throughout the Southwest and get this species out in the field once again. So this one, if you harvest a seed 1 year, just wait and do it the next year. You could just put a seed packet for a month, month and a half in the refrigerator, and then they're ready to go. Or just leave them out at room temperature for a full year. In that time, the seeds will mature and they'll be ready to germinate. It's takes quite a few seeds to get a plant, so I'm saying do 5 seeds per cell on this one, and chances are you'll get a germinant in each cell. 12 days germination. It's so nice that all of these plants have really short germination times thus far that we've talked about. Full sun, low water, just regular rain out of the sky is going to be good for this one, July through October blooming. You can also see in the picture of this montane wildflower field, there's not only the yellow, but then you also have the erigeron, the showy daisy in there too. Really nice mix. I didn't grow that one, so I'm not going to talk about that one. Racco, Ratibida columnifera, or Mexican hat. That's one most people are familiar with this plant. So it's one that has a really long bloom time, and so the bees and butterflies really like it. This is a really easy one to grow, really easy to save seeds from this one. So I really encourage you to grow this one, grab your seeds, start throwing them around all over the place. Now, Ratibida columnifera has a red variety and a yellow variety and everything in between. So typically, you'll see more of the yellow variety available for sale, but it's fun if you can get the red and to just have more of variety just for the aesthetics of your dryland prairie that you're now making. Okay, Rudbeckia laciniata, cutleaf coneflower. So this is a really tall coneflower, and you see it a lot streamside in the mountains here. So we're going to say that it's got a little more water requirements than some of the other. Butterflies and bees love it. Here you can see on the left picture, you've got some flies that are pollinating. And on the right, you've got 2 butterflies that are pollinating too. So everyone really likes these plants, the sexy pollinators and the ugly pollinators. They all like it. That long bloom season is really good. And there's one thing that I really want to say about this is it does create this critical habitat for one at-risk native species that we're going to talk about in a second. All right. So 4 seeds per cell, no stratification, just put them in the cells and get them started. Starts, a week to 3 weeks for this one to germinate. This plant can get 7 feet tall, which is amazing for a coneflower. So full or part sun is fine on this, blooming from June to September. So have you thought of what an at-risk species might be for this particular plant? Well, here it is. It's the native plant enthusiast. So native plant enthusiasts need critical habitat to enjoy the native plants, okay? And so here what we have is a native plant enthusiast in her preferred habitat of Rudbeckia laciniata. And I would contrast that kind of habitat with this kind of habitat, okay? So this Habitat for Humanity is building affordable houses in Taos, which is absolutely great. They have 14 new houses that they're planning to build within the next couple of years in Taos. This one was just completed in 2025. And as a native plant enthusiast, I look at this house and I see that something is missing. And so when you look at how they designed this to dehydrate the landscape. If you look at that house, it looks like it has a sloped roof all going in one direction. And so there's a bunch of rainwater that's coming off of that roof, right? So a 1,200 square foot house in Taos will shed over 9,000 gallons in a year. And what they did with that house is they made all of that water just shed to the street and put nothing but gravel all the way around that house, which creates a heat island effect. And if you were a kid growing up in that house, how are you going to learn a love of nature? So it is housing, but it's not habitat. So what I'd like to propose to our board members here of the Taos chapter of the Native Plant Society is, could we collaborate with Habitat for Humanity and maybe put in a little rain garden or a little dry garden at these homes? Because if they have the backhoe there spreading that gravel, they could just as easily create a rain garden. So this is Brad Lancaster's work. Great website, really amazing books. You can buy the books direct from him at a deep discount. And what a rain garden is, it's taking that water and growing plants at your normal level and then slightly below that and then deeper down. So just maybe 4 inches deep at the deepest part. 8 inches in the deepest part, 4 inches lower from ground level, and then your regular grade. What that is going to do is it's going to give you 3 different water zones so you can create gardens with 3 different types of plants. It'd be really easy to do. The greenhouse team might be able to put some plants together to do this sort of thing. And maybe there's an opportunity there so that we can build habitat for the wildlife as well as housing for the people all together. So this is a dry garden in Taos. This garden, once established, has not been watered. So that's the potential of what happens when you pay attention to what really was here pre-contact. Before we started having all the exotic herbivores that changed the valley to what we have now. How can all of these plants that we're talking about today could become a part of doing a dry garden. And the thing is, if you were to buy all of those plants, it would cost you well over $1,000. But if you can grow all of those plants, you could easily grow all of that for well under $50. It's easy. I'm telling you, you can all do it, okay? All right, Daca, Dahlia candida, white prairie clover. The picture on the lower right is the maturing seed head that's drying. So that's when it gets that pretty red color. Clovers are nitrogen fixers, and this one has a 2-month bloom. It gets about 2 feet high, maybe a foot wide. Fast germinator in 10 days. If you collect that seed, you're going to have to scarify it with sandpaper because it has a hard seed hull. If you buy that seed commercially, that most likely that seed hull is going to be taken off, and then you don't have to worry about scarifying it. So if it's a dark seed hull, then you're going to want to scarify it. If it's more of a tan color, you're just good to sow. And you don't have to stratify it other than just, put it in the fridge for a month and you're good to go. And Dapu, Dahlia purpurea. So that's the purple clover instead of the white clover. Purple prairie clover is the common name that people use. Again, a nitrogen fixer. Summer blooms, even goes a little bit later than the white. Germinates in 10 days. Same thing about the scarification. Same thing about just some dry cold storage before you sow it. So that'll go all the way into September. Really nice purple color. And can take some shade. Doesn't have to be absolutely full sun all day long. So Oenothera elata, O-E-E-L, Hooker's Evening Primrose. This is a nice one. It's a really tall primrose. So primroses are very large flowers, very showy, very yellow, and good producer of pollen and nectar. There you can see just a gorgeous canary yellow blossom. Germinates in 7 days, no stratification required, just really good. This could be, I have never seen an 8-foot tall one, but I guess in some places it could get that big. I'm thinking more in the 3 to 4 range here. And, but good long 4-month bloom period. Okay, Verbena McDougalii. So why would somebody name it McDougalii? I have a friend who calls it McGoogly Eyes. And there's Mr. McDougal. Actually, Mr. McDougal is a really interesting character, fun to read about him. And I really like so he ended up starting this desert plant laboratory down near Tucson. And he was one of the first people to study chlorophyll, of all things. And so I also want you to take note so that's a tree cholla here, and we're going to see a picture of a tree cholla in Taos later on in the talk. And I don't know if the plant is particularly named after him. It probably is, because he was busy in the Southwest identifying all kinds of plants. So let's get back to this one. They also call it spike verbena. So the reason you'll see in the next slide why they call it spike. It has a long bloom time, excuse me, a nectar and pollinator, pollen producer. So here you can see the spikes of the verbena. So it starts flowering at the bottom and it just keeps going up and up and up and up for the whole season, all the way into October. By the end of that, you will have a seed head that is about 4 inches long, maybe even a little bit longer. A really easy plant to grow here. This one is popular with the local herbalists. You know, a lot of us all in our 20s harvested weeds and shook them in a mason jar with vodka and called ourselves herbalists. Well, this is one of those plants that we did that with, okay? So a lot of these plants were used for, so this was used for PMS, among other things. I'm not going to talk about all of these ethnobotanical uses of these plants. A lot of these plants are used ceremonially, medicinally, and for food. There's all kinds of uses for these plants beyond just beauty and pollinator support. So there's a cart full of 2,000 Vima plants going out the door. That was all going to a seed farm. And so they will harvest the seeds starting this fall to produce more native plants. We're getting toward the end of plants. Sphaerosia fendleri. So Mr. Fendler got a globe mallow named after him. You'll see this plant a lot. Some of them are already blooming now. They're not necessarily as tall as what they can get, especially this year. I've never seen a 4-foot tall one. Certainly they with a little supplemental water like roadside, that sort of stuff, it will easily reach 2 feet. There's all kinds, they use it in shampoo traditionally. So, the Spanish terms here, yerba de la grita is one thing that you'll hear for this one. Mal de ojo is another local name for this. And the botanists call it Sphaerosia fendleri. This one really does need scarification. And so the way I did it on this one was get a little pot, get that water boiling, put your seeds in there, wait 10 seconds, then pour that boiling water and the seeds into a sieve. And then you can let those seeds dry down a little bit so that you can handle them individually and then plant them. And so don't be alarmed that you're boiling seeds. That's not enough to kill them, but it is enough to really soften that seed coat on it so that the seed will imbibe. And once it imbibes the water, then it can start sending out a little radicle, and soon you will have a top. So in May, that's my first 6,000 that I was doing there. And then 3 months later, there it is in August, ready to go, okay? So they really do establish quickly. And so in August, by that point, there were a intact root ball going a full 8 inches down in those containers. So what are we going to do with all those plants? So you might have some land that looks like this, right? So Taos is right on the edge of 2 different ecozones, right? We have the Colorado Plateau, which is this flat area that we're on, and then we have the Southern Rockies, which are right over to this side of us right now. So being there right on that edge gives us a huge diversity of plants. And it's part of what makes Taos really a special place. But what happened was at some point, things got a little overgrazed here, and the sage is what became the dominant species. But if you look in this picture, you can say between those sage plants, there's some other stuff that's there. Now the sage has been holding the soil. It's been dropping leaves and building a little soil under it. It's also the nurse crop for the pinon trees. So the pinon jays will plant pinon nuts under the sagebrush. And that's why the pinon are coming up in the sage. So I'm not saying to, like that house where the first thing they did was scrape the entire ecosystem away to build a house. So I wouldn't say that what we want to do is just get rid of all of this sagebrush at once, but clear it out so that you could put in some more of the forbs, get more of the flowering species going, and some grasses. Okay, so let's make some habitat together here, all right? So I want you've seen a bunch of shrubs and forbs. I want you to pick a shrub. I want you to pick 4 forbs and a grass. And you're like, wait a minute, but we haven't talked about any grasses. Okay, let's talk about this one. It sounds Egyptian, but it's not. Acnanthrum hymeneoides, Indian rice grass. So rice grass is an important grain here. It's the first grain to mature. It matures at the end of June, and it's very palatable. It's easy to harvest. And so I chose this particular grass. It wasn't part of the restoration work last year because it's a cool season bunch grass that's very showy. That seed head, it will hold on to it well into the winter, if not further into the spring. The plant can survive on as little as 6 inches of rain, but some of the varieties that I'll talk about here were selected from the Colorado Plateau, so they're adapted to the 12 inches, plus or minus 50% that we get here. And so this is one which is more housing than food for the pollinators. You'll see there's most of our bees here are solitary bees. They're not honeybees in hives of thousands. Those are exotic. That's a Eurasian species. The native bumblebees and stuff, there's one queen who overwinters, and then she creates a nest underground. So this creates shelter for the solitary bees and the wasps. So we're talking about the beneficial wasps. These are not like paper wasps or some sort of like hornet that's going to sting you. These are minute wasps that are beneficial to the ecosystem. So Star Lake is a variety introduced by NRCS, which is from New Mexico, and it was selected for early germination. That's, you're going to have to, on this one, do a cold moist strat on it. But this is one that they developed, of course, for the ranchers who want to put out some palatable grass that is nice and green in the spring. Really attractive grass. So, okay, we're going to take all those plants and we're going to assemble them together and we're going to build some guilds, okay? So what is a guild? A guild is just companion planting. So like, let's say you put in an apple tree and you put in some yarrow plants underneath so that you have some predatory wasps to go up and get the bugs off your apple tree. That's a guild, okay? So I want you to imagine in your mind, let's take 20 square feet and we're going to plant 10 plants in there, plus or minus a few more. And we're going to put in some grasses, 3 grasses, some milkweeds, maybe 2 milkweed plants. Pick a species. Do you want the poison milkweed or do you want the showy milkweed? Whatever you like. A couple of asters. You can pick 1 of each. I would prefer that you pick 2 of the same species. Makes more sense. Pick 2 other forbs, whichever one you liked out of all that. 1 of those shrubs, you can do an Apache plume, you could do a chamisa. Put that all together in 20 square feet, 4 feet by 5 feet. Take that and multiply it 6 times over, okay? All that does is, if you're putting in 10 plants per guild, you need 100, you've got 60 plants that you need in order to do that, okay? So 60 plants, you could do that in 2 of those trays I showed you at the beginning. If you want to put in a few more plants, you could do 4 trays. 4 of those trays will fit on a metro rack with 2 4-foot shop lights. So it'll just take up 8 square feet, 2 feet by 4 feet. You could grow all those plants under artificial light and then plant them out in the spring. So that kind of intense guild spacing, and put it next to your driveway where it gets a little bit of extra water. And what you've done is you've created a nucleus of the ecosystem of this area, and that can expand out from there. So then you'll be attracting birds that are eating those seeds in the wintertime. You're attracting the pollinators. It is going to turn into an amazing ecosystem, just a little tiny place. Now, I've been calling these things a pocket prairie. This area used to be grasslands down here in the flats. I like pocket prairie. It's a cute term. If you look at that online, you can find a lot of information. So it's an easy way to find more information about doing this kind of stuff. So now we need to water all those plants. So we need to establish those plants, but we need to wean them off of our hose as soon as possible. If you just keep watering that over and over again, they are never going to develop the root system that they need to survive here. So here's what I suggest. Water it once a day the first 3 days after you plant them in. Okay? Then go to every other day for 3 times over. Go to once a week, go to twice a week, go to 3 times a week, and at that point, game over. You can maybe water it once a month, but really just let it be so it can develop that root system. And really, we planted stuff in the fall. We went out and checked it this spring. It had been watered once, and it was alive this spring, okay? So you have to trust that these native plants, they know what to do here, okay? So I know we all have hoses, and then it comes really tempting. So here's your theoretical month. You can see your 5 weeks there. Water, 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 skip some days, and then go to once a week, go to every 2 weeks, go to every 3 weeks. And that's how you establish your plant, but still make it turn into the xeriscape plant that it is. So here's that tree cholla in Taos. For some reason, it turned into a bush here and not a tree. But that's the other side of this house, a dry garden, a completely dry garden. So here's some seed companies to look for. Western Native Seed is a really good source. They have many native seeds of this area, plants of the Southwest. They have a retail store on Agraphia in Albuquerque. They have a retail store in Albuquerque as well. Santa Fe, sorry. Yeah, Agraphia in Santa Fe. And they take cash or checks only. So be prepared if you go there. Great assortment of seeds. You might spend $4 or $5 on a packet of seed, get 5 varieties. You've spent well under $30 and got a bunch of seed. The Native Plant Society will have a lot of these seeds available in the fall. We have a greenhouse crew that cleans seeds weekly as seeds become available. And we're really all about trying to get seeds out into the community and do more restoration on a grassroots level as well as on a governmental level. Prairie Moon is a good website that gives you information about germination. This webinar that we're doing right now, I guess it's not a webinar, it's a live presentation. We'll get up on YouTube on our Facebook channel for the Taos chapter of the Native Plant Society. Everwild.com is another one. They have a lot of native flowers, but that was the one where the Heterotheca villosa, I'm not so sure. Maybe they put the wrong picture up. But anyway, I couldn't have done all of this work or made this presentation without all of these people helping. Margie Gibson, president of the Native Plant Society, gave me permission to use many of these pictures. The pictures that had no credits on them were all my own. Other people that contributed pictures, we have to thank posthumously George Miller. His website was taken over by the Native Plant Society upon his death. It is an amazing website full of information. Al Schneider's website, southwestcoloradowildflowers.com. That is an amazing resource as well. I contacted him over email. He immediately gave me permission to use any of his photos off of his website. The two websites combined gives you a lot of information. I encourage you to go to both if you're thinking about any of these species or any others. A lot of Al's pictures are more habitat-based as well as the close-ups, where George's pictures are much more about the identification and very close-up, less so about the habitat. So they both are important websites to check. You'll have a great time on both of them. Mary Adams and Jan Martinson were very gracious in letting me use their pictures. Thanks to them. Catherine, Phil, and Rosemary, they all gave me pots to use because I had to grow, I don't know how many thousands of plants. David and Elizabeth helped in the greenhouse at some point this last year on these propagations. Teresa, being a model native plant enthusiast, was definitely helpful. Francis for doing all of the AV. That's really blessed that we have Francis here helping us. The Institute for Applied Ecology were the ones who provided me with all of the seeds for these propagations. And those ended up on U.S. Forest Service, Carson National Forest lands, as well as Bureau of Land Management lands, okay? So there's some plants over there. You can play ID Me. If you look on the back, you'll see who they are. If you don't know who they are, I probably am the only one who could identify the different asters at this life stage, and that's only because I was staring at 1,000 of each of them for a year. So that'll be a fun game, and you can always just cheat and look on the back. So that's all the botanical names. We went through 15 different species, and there's your common names, which is an easier way to think of all of these. And we can open that up for questions and discussion. Thanks so much. Rosemary.
Great information on the plants, and I'm even imagining putting together a little thing for our plant sales of here, try this, and this, and you know. You didn't say anything about what soil, what earth this is going into.
Right.
So, yeah, which is a whole other thing. But I have one section of my a little hillside that was all from built a house, and then it ended up with gravel on top, and I put some plants in there. The temptation was to build up and amend soil around it, but I didn't want to do that very much because I wanted these to grow where they were.
Right.
And then I have this other section that I did a little, what I call a dryland meadow, a prairie type thing, where I'm starting to get things established, but I actually dug down and amended some of this soil. So if we were just telling people, so where do you put these on your land, and what do I need to do to put them in the land?
Right.
Anything brief?
Sure. So I am a strong advocate in lifting the soil with a garden fork to just break up that compaction.
Yeah.
That definitely is a good thing to do. I don't want to turn that soil. You know, we have most people have a lot of clay here. And yeah, I've got some plants that are growing in basically when they built the house 35 years ago, and it's just, it's gravel. I think they built raised beds out of just like base course. It's crazy what they've done. So I'm a firm believer in definitely lifting that soil to get some oxygen in there, and so that there can be some water penetration and root penetration. In terms of amending the soil, the thing is, we're going to grow this stuff in potting mix, which is not ideal. It tends to be a little bit acidic, and whereas our soils are alkaline here. So if you're going to amend the soil at all, I say no more than 10%. And I'm not talking about peat moss ever here, because peat moss is hydrophobic. So if you're going to amend with anything, I say to amend with coconut coir. So that is, an agricultural waste product, and you can add a little bit of that just to add some organic matter and aeration, but that is about as much as I would do. So what I found when I was producing these seedlings is they stalled out in the potting mix. They grew to about 1/4 to 1/2 inch tall, and then they did nothing. And so I did what is called a pour-through test, which is where you capture the leachate and you measure the electrical conductivity of the leachate. So I don't want to get too technical for your average person. But what I found was there was no nutrition in the leachate. So that meant there was nothing in that potting mix left. I used organic potting mix, with a little bit of turkey manure in it. So I did have to fertilize 2 to 3 times in that May through October period in order to get the growth that I needed. So I'm okay with a little bit of organic fertilizer used. I would just do a liquid feed later on and do it, at half strength and only maybe like once or twice in a year. In terms of what are you going to put on the slope versus the flatlands, put your low water use on the slopes, and on the flatlands you can do the medium water would be the best way. Yeah.
So what if I forget whether it needs to be cold stratified or not? Can I just shove it in the fridge and it'd be okay if it didn't need to be?
So it would be okay. It's great to look that up. What happens is if you don't do the stratification, you'll get less germination and it'll be more erratic. And so it really is worth doing, and it's not that hard.
And it wouldn't hurt for the ones that don't need it?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So I say, some is dry and some is cold moist. Yeah, it's just the moist ones that require, a baggie and some play sand. Yeah. Yeah.
When you were given the seed and like within one species, the different genetics that were coming from the different locations, did you then keep track of that? Like, this is my aster that's from a dry place, this is my aster or did you just kind of grow them?
So the Institute for Applied Ecology kept track of the characteristics of where those accessions were from. Mm-hmm. And so all I was given was a secret code.
Oh, okay.
And so I never really knew where they got any of these from. Some of them would have come from seed farms, some of them would have been wild collected. And so I kept each accession separate and delivered them each accession in a separate tray, and that's all I could do.
And did you notice a significant difference between the different?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, absolutely. The Mexican hat that I did, I had a terrible time germinating one of those accessions. And I have a whole series of whiny emails to IAE about that I was sowing this one for the 3rd time.
Yeah. And another question, about timing in the year. Mm-hmm. How much can you get away with not following, like maybe trying to propagate a bunch of seed in, say, late June or July, or what do you have to say about that?
I would say by July, I wouldn't want to start really anything.
Sure.
But so some of the ones that germinate quickly, which is pretty much everything we talked about today. I mean, if you can put in a 3-month plant, you might have to baby it a bit through the fall. But I do think it's possible. I really do. Yeah.
Is it possible to just winter sow all of these seeds? Or no?
So there's 2 types of winter sowing. Are you talking about doing it in containers?
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a great thing to do. All those cold, moist strat, all of those could just be winter sown in containers. And that's essentially what I did. So starting in February and March, I was sowing into the trays of the containers, and I would just put them outside to go through the whole freeze-thaw cycle of the rest of the winter. And that was how I was able to do them. You can also do them in an unheated garage. the ones that I put outside, I covered in hardware cloth, which is like a 1/4-inch mesh. And some of it I did under an 1/8-inch mesh, just to keep all the critters from going in there and eating all my seeds.
What about, because I have a lot of stuff like, I just moved here from Illinois, so I'm learning a whole new gardening. But
Yes.
I bought some young plants, and they're getting eaten, you know. I don't use pesticides, I don't like poison, but I do, I think it's groundhog. Do you have any, tips on, with the wildlife, how to keep them from eating everything?
So I use a lot of hardware cloth, and so I build cages. I live on the edge of the national forest, and I saw a deer grazing today, which was very disappointing because they're supposed to go to the mountains for the growing season and come back and raid me in the fall. But there's always a lollygagger around. So I protect everything I can with wire mesh.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even the native plants that kind of work in this ecology, the deer can basically, like, I'm in the mountains, the deer can let them out. Yeah.
They definitely can, yes. Yeah.
And most of these would be like cold tolerance or 20 feet-ish, 30 below, if I'm up really high.
Yeah, so yes, they would. They would. The only thing, most of them are certainly good to 8,500 feet, everything that we talked about.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. Sure.
Well, I noticed that you've worked with Carson
Yes.
National Forest, and where you've been out there with me. 8, 9, 10 years ago, several of us at Forest Service request planted some forbs and some patch blooms and fern bush in front of the wall. I would really like to do a planting right in front of the house, which is about 40 by 30 feet. Now it's mostly cheatgrass, maybe some asters in the fall are the nicest thing, mustard, a whole mix. Have you worked on that kind of land?
Yes.
Dry land on the Carson?
Yes. Yes. It is possible.
It is possible with minimal water supply.
Yes. Yeah, we can do it.
Okay?
Yeah,
Get
let's
there
do
for
it.
me.
Okay, cool. That'll be fun. Jim.
Hi, Paul. So our predators the most concerned is rabbits.
Yes.
And then I've got some hardware cloth and was making sort of a cylinder to put up around it. What do you think of that, and what else would you recommend to deter rabbits?
Yes. So I am intrigued by the Heterotheca villosa, where I have read that rabbits do not eat it. Okay, so it seems like it's a plant with superpowers. I do the same thing. I build rectangular cages with the 1/4-inch or 1/8-inch hardware cloth, and then use landscape staples to keep it down. And that's what I end up doing. Yeah.
Are your cages just folded and wired together, or do you have
Yes.
a wooden frame?
No, I just fold them and take a piece of wire and kind of sew the seam of it with wire. Yeah.
I've got variation too for at least for the start, until they're about this big. At the dollar store, you can get little wire trash baskets.
Oh.
$1 a piece. And so they're round and they're about that tall. So I went out and got 15 of them, and the stakes. And so when I start with those, when I put them out there, because I have rabbits, and then I stake those down around the plant for the first, at least the first number of months, but some of them will stay for a year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about the kind of soil and conditions of when you're raising the plants themselves?
Right.
And you said dry gardens, so it's either outside or.
Yeah, so these, I did the propagation within a greenhouse, and that was heated to 40 degrees once the plants were in their growth stage. Some of the plants were tucked in between two cisterns to keep them colder for longer because they needed more time in the cold stratification. Some of them were just outside on the north porch where they got no direct sun. And then once everything was growing in the greenhouse, I never heated it any more than 45 degrees. So, but in the daytime, it was getting up into the 80s in there. And so the plants had to deal with that easily 40-degree temperature swing every day, which is kind of normal for Taos anyway. Yeah.
And the seed starting mix or potting soil?
So it was just a straight up potting soil. It wasn't a special germination mix or anything like that. And so I used an organic mix. I'm not even sure which manufacturer, but a commercial organic mix is what I did it in. Elizabeth, did you have a question?
Yeah, the prairie clovers, the dahlias,
Mhm.
I've seen the white lot in this area.
Right.
Kind of new here. Is the purple common?
No,
Okay.
no. I don't even think the purple is native to this particular
Yeah, like
county.
beside the mountains mostly, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's why I said in or near,
Yeah.
because I really just haven't seen it.
No, it's such a beautiful one.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
around here.
Yeah, it's fun. So it's in the county now for sure.
Oh, and sub question. If you could choose additional species that you would focus on for like an urban pocket prairie or something next to the home, any other things that really pique your fancy? Or?
Well, definitely penstemons are workhorses. That's a great one that I have a lot of in my yard, and so some of them are more hardy than others here. So not all of them do well. I think everyone should have a bunch of penstemons. I like Maximilian sunflowers because that's super easy and it gets, a perennial sunflower that's makes a 3-foot diameter patch. That's a great one. I don't know, for the most part, I've never been a home gardener. I've always been growing for everybody else. And so now I get to actually grow for me, and I'm gonna explore a lot of stuff. I'm playing a lot right now. Mirabilis multiflora, Desert 4 o'clock. That's one. I have a hard time germinating, but I have a couple hundred going right now, hoping, and I have about 6 that are up. I do a lot of bur oak and gamble oak. So we talked about more just the smaller species. At some point, we need to have a savanna within our prairie, right? So our grasslands, we need some ponderosa savanna, we need some pinon savanna, and all of that. So yeah, there's endless possibilities of what I would like to do. And this year I refused all of these contracts. I didn't do any propagation for anyone but myself. Yeah.
I have a purple prairie clover that I probably bought from Plants of the Southwest or High Country Gardens years ago. And it's taken probably 10 years, but it's really gotten bushy.
Great.
So if you want seeds, and I've got a huge hairy golden aster
Oh, great.
that you're welcome to, that's just, walked onto my property one day about 10 years ago. And it just comes back every year and there's seedlings.
Well, great.
You're more than welcome
Yes,
to come get it.
I will be in touch. All right, we try to end at 7:30, but so,
Thank you, Paul.
thank you.